please help me welcome to the stage our first contestant, Jason Kramer, U.S. Sales Director, PredictX.
Good morning. I have the pleasure of kicking off our Innovation Face-Off. And for many of you, as it is for me, this is my first in-person event since the pandemic changed our industry. And with respect to change, I'm here to introduce you to PredictX's simulation engine. It was developed to solve complex, multifaceted problems that simple BI tools cannot accomplish. It is an entire universe for travel managers and its stakeholders to simulate and forecast their own decisions, their traveler decisions and behaviors, compliance, and any other category that you want to simulate or forecast. So to start, we'll do a little revisionist history on what we used to do to budget and forecast, maybe giggle it at a little bit, and why simulation engine is the first example in our industry of a true data science application to support decision-making processes. So before COVID, in simpler times, we looked at last year's volume. We identified some simple trends in our business, maybe made some tweaks based on market trends, what our businesses were telling us, and what was happening in the industry. And from that, we would allocate budgets, expected travel volumes, and then we would source accordingly. Times are different. We work in a different environment. We work in a very volatile environment. So rates are rapidly changing, unpredictable travel volumes, air schedules are all over the place, inventory in other categories are fits and starts, hotel closures, reopenings. So that's just one factor, but the other factors are also just as important, and that's evolving policies around work from home policies, your geographic shifts about where your travelers sit, and office visit policies. So we all know by now that tomorrow's optimal program is not 2019's optimal program. So how do we plan for this environment? Well, enter simulation engine. Simulation engine is a tool that takes in all your data, TMC, card, expense, your hierarchy, your departments, if you will. And you can build in all the differences around your program. Now with that data, we'll go through a very comprehensive scrubbing, matching, so it's arguably the most accurate data in your arsenal. But let's talk about the differences, because there are differences with our travel patterns now. And I'll use myself as an example. I live down in Alexandria, Virginia. I always used to come up to New York. I would take the shuttle. But perhaps now, although I don't, I still feel comfortable flying, there might be times where I or your employees or your travelers feel more comfortable driving, right? So what the simulation engine can then do is adjust for those changes accordingly. So you can forecast, simulate, go to your stakeholders with confidence and say, if I change X of my flights that my employees or my travelers now want to drive, we can take that into consideration. And because we're building in market information, rental cars are high, inventory shortages make it challenging. So we can build in rate availability, airfare availability, things along rental cars and what's happening with rates, so that you can forecast and simulate with accuracy and go to your stakeholders. It is very complex behind the scenes. We make it simple. So what I'll show is a very simple demo of how our trip forecaster works. So PredictX is based on modules, which are what you see on the below of the screen. But we're going to look at Trip Forecaster today and how we can simulate a specific trip. So with now the borders reopening, Europe can now come to the US, or at least starting in November. Let's do a simple example of London to New York. We're going to predict, we know that 3 travelers are going to go, and we know that the duration of their trip is going to be 2 nights. So using all your program data, using your contracts that have been negotiated, we can confidently forecast a low and a high range of what your trip is going to cost. Air, hotel, other costs, maybe a resort fee, your meals, your expenses, and all your ground transportation. So you get at a total trip cost, and this can be grown to look at your overall program as well. You're also going to get your CO2 emissions. So with sustainability being at the forefront of many conversations, we'll very quickly be able to understand what the burn is, if you will, on carbon emissions. So that's our demo. That's simulation engine. That's our trip forecaster. So once you have that model, you can change all or part of it. You can look at different aspects, or again, you can look at your entire program, or you can set a goal or a spend cap. And I'll give you an example. We'll start with a very simple example. What if your CFO came to you and said, I need you to slash 50% of your budget from 2019, or maybe it's a dollar figure, it's $500,000. You can enter those inputs into the simulation engine, and it will deliver to you where those savings can be derived from. Those categories can be unique to your own individual organization. It's not going to be basic just as advanced purchase or changing from business class to coach class. So there's factors that can be built into these simulations. But let's take it a step further. What if your CFO came to you and said, I need you to cut 50% of your budget, but you knew that the sales department needed to keep their same budget from 2019 because they're bringing in the revenue. Simulation and the forecast has the capability to adjust what percentage you're cutting from departments. So if you want to keep sales at 100%, you've got to cut elsewhere, and that simulation, that forecast is going to allow you to see how you can pull that off. So some current uses for simulation engine. Build your budget with confidence. Forecast what that budget is going to be. See the impact of what your policy changes are going to be. A lot of companies, if not all, have gone about policy changes in the last year. See the impact of travel pattern shifts, whether or not it's just flying domestic US right now, or whether or not it's a work from home policy and somebody's traveling from a different destination. Why is it unique? It's not simple what if. It is impossible to replicate with BI tools. Any data set can be plugged and played into it, and it is the first example in the travel and expense where it is a specific true data science application.